Alrighty, time for another. Well, might be running. Had a connection issue. So, time for another weekly update for folks. This last week, good chunk of it was budget committee, but there were a lot of other things that took place, some things that had a lot of people's attention, like the urban renewal district. So I'm going to run through a couple of things that went on, starting with the budget. So, as folks expected, I knew it would be coming. There is a deficit. It's about $1.8 million. Part of that is because the ONC land cuts that occur, the timber cuts, were lower than expected, as I've understood it. So there was supposed to be, if cuts had been at the expected level, there would have been an extra $1 million that came to the county. There wasn't. So ONC forests not being harvested at the rate expected more than doubled the deficit. It's a problem when that happens. Deficit 1.8. What that means in people is 1.8 mil is about 14 positions, and that is something we really can't afford. I know John's mentioned the numbers a lot when he got on the commission. I think that would have been 10 or maybe 12 years ago, somewhere in there. They had 550 employees. Right now that's down to about 350, maybe 340. So things have been cut back drastically. And eventually when you cut and cut and cut, there just isn't anything left to cut. If we cut the assessor, then we don't assess properties so that tax rates stay appropriate. If we cut the clerk, you don't have elections, so that's not going to work. Surveyor you need for lot line adjustments, property sales, that sort of thing. You just run out of things. So what we're doing is looking at where there is additional revenue, what we can do moving forward in the future, and some of what we've got right now. Treasurer identified some potential funds through interest rates on one of our timber funds. So that's a possibility that's out there. I've been working with the Elliott Forest folks on what they're willing to do to pay for an officer. So by the end of this fiscal, too late for this budget, but the end of this fiscal, end of June, they'll have a budget determined, and it should include either one half or one full-time officer. So that's one more position we can save. I have put to the sheriff and our parks manager the idea of a safety fee on some of our campgrounds. Something we see with abandoned dunes is they voluntarily impose a fee, and it contributes back to our sheriff's department significantly. I think it was just about $2 million, if not over $2 million this last year. Obviously, we don't have what abandoned dunes has, but if we put a safety fee on something like the slots at Riley Ranch, still people coming from out of the area, drawing on tourists' money and funding things we need locally. In particular, if it came from there, that would keep an officer more so in the North County with that particular funding, and help out with Lakeside's efforts to get a grant so that they can fund part of an officer that they would acquire from us. And then coupling with the Elliott, now we're starting to compile enough pieces to not only fund some officers, but really have a presence in the North County that we've struggled with. Especially if we can keep folks up there, that leaves, North Bend and South instead of having to go all the way up to Lakeside. So it's got a bunch of benefits if we keep getting those pieces moving and going together. Talked about the Elliott. Talking about money and resources, the urban renewal district that the county has. And to clarify for folks, because there's been some confusion around this is only the county's urban renewal district. It is the North Spit and a little extra land, but mostly the North Spit, out where Southport is. So I had brought up to Initially, I thought dissolve, and then greater minds told me about the opportunity to under levy, so I moved towards under levy. So what under levy means, this was something that was mistaken in the paper. They thought I was proposing a levy. I was saying under levy, which means the tax that is already being levied would be reduced. Folks wouldn't see a change on their property taxes. What it would do is, instead of money going to the urban renewal district, it would return that money to the county's general fund and the funds of the overlapping taxing districts. So it would bring about $52,000 a year back into the general fund of the county. Where that went, it turned into a conversation again about dissolution. In dissolution, about $350,000 would come in one-time money back to the county, and then obviously the under levy effect would no longer be relevant. We would still get the $52,000 back because there would be no levy to under levy, and that was talked about as kind of a, I looked at the charts, I didn't see it doing anything. I came into it wanting to do an under levy, and when I saw that, got a little frustrated and figured, well, all right, maybe we do get rid of it. But that frank conversation amongst everybody, the commissioners and the board for the urban renewal district and the port, bore fruit. They came back with a pretty strong proposal about the county taking management of the URA back in-house. They would provide funding around the administration and an administrative rate, and it would have some other benefits. And then I'm still talking about under levy. I think that everyone understood I'm still hearing about that, but my goal is to see it under levied right now because it's not doing much. There's no signs that it's going to urgently do something, but it has some projects it can do while it's not collecting revenue. That's my opinion and position so far. So after all that, we ended up roughly back where I started it, but with a little benefit more. Let's see. Something cool just happens to be something I stumbled upon this week. There's a larger business out in Charleston that's looking at expansion. Been a lot of talk around Charleston because it does have so much potential. It's had struggles for many years, but it's also stayed successful with regards to the college and pretty healthy tourism side. It has potential to do more. So that's what we're all looking forward to, I think, especially since they joined the Visitors Convention Bureau and the Travel of Southern Oregon. Things changed names over the years. I was on council for 8 years. Lots of names came and went. I mix them up sometimes. Then some other aspects. I had a meeting with Customs and Border Patrol this week. Again, talking about the security along our port, our waterways, because running from Brookings to Newport, there is only one port officer for the Customs and Border Patrol. So then about 2021, the DEA was reporting that maritime smuggling had overtaken land-based, or trafficking. So it's important that we stay on target a little about that and remind folks that there's a lot of focus about the northern and southern borders, but we here have a western one. And depending on the data you look at, that is a bigger problem because that is the dominant form of smuggling now. So I met with them. I'd been talking with the local guy a lot. This time I got to meet with his boss for the region. So that was pretty cool. And they're looking at how they can help, and they expressed an interest in our interagency narcotics team, which to try and get some of those other designations, like the HIDTA designation, high intensity drug trafficking area, we have to show collaboration with some federal assets, and they would qualify. Also met with the Coast Guard commander out our area this week, and talked about similar things and how they could help us, because having talked with a couple of officers and a couple of folks, when a ship pulls in and they do finally have the green light to go inspect it, they can, I think they deputize, or they definitely bring some of our officers along with them. And that's awesome. It gives us a chance to look at things, but our officers aren't sailors. So I talked to the Coast Guard about, hey, can they maybe come along or provide some training so that people know when they're in the ship what they're looking at, because it's a whole different ball game once you're on a ship. And I was able to give the lady from Customs and Border some history on the area. She's newer to the post, so talked to her a little about the drug history in our area, the mental health issues, because she's coming from another state, so what she sees here is very different. And then just some general history of the area. I think third largest shipping port in the world at one point. A lot of timber. Once upon a time, coal industry was big here, chromium mining. There's been all kinds of things over the years, and I just got to share some of the stuff that's lurking in the caverns of my head. And then lastly, just talking about economic development. I presented at the Wednesday Business Connection lunch that the Chamber of Commerce does each week. This week I presented. And kind of the message I ended with there, and I want to end with for folks, is there is hope. There is opportunity. We have a $1.8 million deficit. That is going to suck this year. Next year, probably going to be rough. I'm hoping for a little more stability. That'll have been my first full year in the position, drumming up and finishing some of these connections I've been working on. So I'm hopeful next year will be balanced and not a crisis to figure out cuts. And then over time, seeing prosperity return, because we do have these opportunities. In 2 years, well, we don't necessarily agree with how it was handled, but the Elliott Forest, they're going to do carbon credit sales. They hadn't talked about providing any money to the county. I talked to them. Now they're definitely talking about how they're going to get money to the county, because I made sure I was clear. It's going to be a very big problem if they don't. In 2 years, that starts. So in 2 years, we should know what revenue that's going to bring in for us. We've got folks reaching out about new business opportunities, not just the international port, which I've understood could be operational in as little as 5 years. But also, I've been talking to people a lot about energy security for our area. We only have 2 major routes that bring power into the area, and that is a danger for consistency of power, for disasters, not just the big one, Cascadia, but even wildfires and these sort of things. It's a problem to lose power. In the course of that conversation came up, we have some areas that are former industrial, and they're not going to be good for much for quite a while, quite a long time. There is the possibility to develop on those with some of these things like smaller localized solar arrays, low service cost for that. You don't need, it's not like if you've got a big housing development on area, you need a bunch more police, bunch more medical. The solar, you make sure the panels are still there, but otherwise they don't need you to return calls very often. But they do generate property value, which increases the tax base, the general fund, and funds public safety without us having to ask the taxpayers for more money. By development, that is how we get around having to ask people for more money. We generate it on our own merit. I had somebody reach out to me about, and I'm going to have a follow-up meeting this week, but it's a small one, about hydrogen cell production. That was a new one to me. I think I've mentioned it a few times now, but it's still a surprising one to have heard about. I got myself a small brief from the South Coast Development Council on the subject so that I can be informed having these conversations, but it's a booming industry. And if we can get something like that out here, that's another one that generates more revenues, good paying jobs, because you're almost making something out of nothing, as near as I understand. But finished products are where the good paying jobs are, and that's what this one is. And it is a more efficient way for ships, it sounds like, vehicles. So it's a big thing, and I'll be keeping digging down that road. And if we can get it somewhere, that's good for our whole area. On that subject, those last two, I suppose, well, and the PCIP, one of the critiques I've heard is that these things are going to bring people from out of the area to the jobs. It's not going to hire local people. I want folks to consider that it has taken more than a generation to get in this pit we're in. It's going to take probably a generation to get out of it. We can make the money good, but part of this is going to be rebuilding who we are. Once upon a time, it still is. People are out in the woods still, but not to the same degree. When you look at it, falling trees, one of the most dangerous jobs out there. The timber industry in general is one of the most dangerous fields. We, as an area, have not been afraid of a challenge. Shipbuilding, travel, that's, especially in the past, an extremely dangerous field. Our area blossomed on it. We are used to challenging things. We are used to taking risk and winning. Right now, we may not have the people to fill all the jobs for one of these industries that may come in. In fact, I can pretty much guarantee we won't. But what we do have is initiative. We have families that are going to raise their kids to get those jobs. It may take time. It will take time. But once we have those industries here, that's when we see our kids and our grandkids prosper. Because with the situation we're in, it's left us behind. What we do now is build a better world for them. That's probably the best place to stop on that one. So, appreciate y'all listening. There will be more coming about the project I've got to get more money back from the state. That's a whole separate bag of worms. But this seems like a good spot to stop. So, I appreciate y'all, and have a good week.